Hello and welcome to Injectables. Take the sting out of composite placement. My name is Sam Simos, and this webinar is sponsored by GC America. I want to welcome everybody tonight to this webinar, and I've got some really exciting things to share with you. Again, my name is Sam Simos. My information is on the screen. If anybody needs to get a hold of me to talk about any questions they might have after the program, that would be fantastic, although you'll get a chance to ask questions by writing after the program. A little bit of legalese. This webinar is intended solely to provide information. It is supported by GC America, the sponsor, through an honorarium paid to the speaker. Content has been provided by both the speaker and the sponsor. The speaker warrants that all figures, photos, and information are his and protected under copyright law. This webinar is not intended to endorse the use of products or services provided by specific vendors. Neither the speaker nor sponsor makes any warranty, express or implied, or assumes any legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of any information, apparatus, product, or process represented, that its use would not infringe privately owned rights. Duplication and use of the information contained within without the speaker's or sponsor's express written permission is strictly prohibited. So that is usually what's at the end of every commercial you hear for cars, and I just thought I would let you hear that. And so I'm excited to start this presentation tonight about injectables. Certainly every manufacturer has some kind of flowable or bulk fill material. But tonight we're going to talk about a little bit of a game changer here. An injectable. GC America introduced an injectable that is much different than your average flowable material. And it comes in a bulk and it comes in a flowable. So we're going to dispose of these products, and we're going to talk about the differences, what it can do for you in your practice, and how it measures up to your average flowable or bulk fill material. So with that, let's get started. And what I want you to do as we proceed with this webinar is I want you to kind of think about when you use a flowable and a bulk fill, and when you and what you use them for. And I think what you're going to do is open up your eyes to a few more possibilities of how you can use your flowables because of this new injectable technology. So injectables, it comes in both a bulk fill and a universal, which the bulk fill means you can fill it up in 4 millimeter increments. And the universal is a universal injectable that you can fill up in 2 millimeter increments. And both of these are very useful in different clinical situations. The consistency is different than a flowable, although it does flow. The extrusion is very easy to get out of the tip. It does have a build-up capability. So what are injectables? Well, they're made of ultra-fine particles. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Again, injectables come in a 4 millimeter depth of cure or the 2 millimeter depth of cure that most of us are used to. But we can also, I think you're going to find that these bulk fills are a real value, a real asset to a clinical situation. The other thing is the difference with these injectables are that you can use it as a capping layer, that final layer. So whether you're doing class 2, whether you're sealing a root canal, whether you're doing any kind of occlusal surface, chewing surface, you can use this flowable as a final capping layer. And that's really one of the biggest game changers that's happening here. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. The wear resistance is excellent, and that's exactly why we can use it as a capping layer. And of course, because it's made of these ultrafine particles, we have a great shine right from the beginning. And so we're going to look at a couple of clinical situations where we have that present. So let's talk about the ultrafine particles and think about this a little bit, because if we do have such great wear and fine particles, how does that happen? Because usually the smaller the filler, the better the gloss. Okay, that's for sure. so we've got great gloss with this material, but usually the lower the degree of total, the lower the total degree of filler, the lower the mechanical toughness and their impaired handling properties. So how do we overcome these contradictions? Because what I'm telling you is that we've got an ultra-fine particle product here, but we have the toughness and we have great handling properties. So how do we overcome these contradictions? Well, we make large fillers out of smaller ones. And this is really nothing new in the world of composite technology. Ivoclar Vivadent introduced this to begin with, and then 3M SB came out with their nanocluster as well. And let's talk a little bit about how these ultrafine particles, because this is the crux of it. And then what happens is that with these ultrafine particles, it's not new to the industry, but what's happens is that every manufacturer kind of makes a new little invention with these things. So it's getting better and better and better. But let's talk a little bit about what Ivoclar and 3M did to begin this wonderful new technology in filler material. Well, Ivoclar came up with these pre-polymerized particles, and they're large particles, and they range in size, but they're larger particles. And so what happened is they had these silanized submicron fillers, and what they did is they put resin around all of these silanized submicron fillers, and they cured it. And then they had this resin matrix, so then they put it in a mill, they broke it all up, and then they had these irregularly shaped pre-polymerized microfillers. And that became, and then they took all of this and put it in a resin, and they broke that all up too. They cured it and broke it all up, so that what you're left with is a nanocluster. Okay, so that's Ivoclar. Now 3M has their nanoclusters, and they started with the zirconia and silicium dioxide nanoparticles, and they put a spray dyeing or calcination, and they made irregularly shaped nanoclusters. So they started with a different kind of submicron particle, and they came up with these nanoclusters. And then what happened is they broke up these nanoclusters and put them in resin and did the same kind of thing that Ivoclar did. So there's really nothing different here other than GC America came up with their own nanocluster, and not a nanocluster, but they came up with their own submicron filler, and it's this HDR with FSC technology, this full coverage silane coating with high density resins. And the full silane coating of ultrafine particles allows the particle to disperse homogeneously in higher density within the resin matrix. So this, along with the finer ultrafine filler, delivers high physical strength, wear resistance, and improved handling. And so you can see these ultrafine particles, the flow, and with this injectable technology. So next, let's talk about now that we understand a little bit about the makeup of the material, let's talk a little bit about what we can do with it. We can use it in a 4 millimeter depth of cure or 2 millimeter depth of cure, and we can use it as a final capping layer. So, when we talk about a bulk cure, it's really interesting to me that a lot of clinicians don't use, as I'm talking to them around the country, a lot of clinicians don't use a bulk fill strategy when they're using their fillable materials. So just to review, we have different layering technologies or techniques. We can do a traditional layering technique in 2 millimeter increments as we get to the top, or we can use a bulk fill flowable with a universal cap. Okay, so you've got your bulk fill, which is usually 4 millimeters deep, and then you put a universal cap on top. Well, what we're suggesting is that you can use these bulk fill strategies with either of these two materials in a 2 millimeter or 4 millimeter increment, and also use it as a capping layer. So it saves a lot of time. It serves a wonderful need of the bulk fill technology in both a traditional layering technique or a bulk fill technique as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the bulk fill technology. Why do we need a bulk fill? And I'm wondering why most clinicians don't employ a bulk fill strategy when they're filling their direct restorations. Most of the feedback that I get when I'm talking to clinicians around the country is that they don't use a bulk fill because it's counterintuitive. They're afraid that the material at the base of the box won't get cured. And really, that's what this material is meant to do. It's meant to disperse the light and cure the material in 4 millimeter increments. So if you're not going past the 4 millimeter depth of cure that's suggested, then you'll be fine. And I suggest that if you're not using a bulk fill technique, you should really look into products that are bulk fill materials, because they're wonderful materials and they save a lot of time, and they really work well. So so let's talk about this bulk fill. What do we look for in a bulk fill material? Well, first of all, we look for adaptation in the cabo surface area of the tooth, and what we want to see is we want to see the flow of material into these crevices and nooks and crannies and down into the box area. A lot of times these areas we can only push the material in and hopefully not collect a bubble in some of these areas. And so what the flowable does is it allows you to these materials actually creep into the crevices and allow you to fill these very, very comfortably, and you can rest assured that they are adapting to the cabo surface area of the restoration or of the preparation. Next, we want a bulk fill should have a depth of cure of 4 millimeters. And so that will satisfy, that's satisfied in this material. The other thing is, the nice thing about a flowable is that it's low shrinkage, and these injectables are definitely low shrinkage. We're going to look at that a little bit, but what that allows us to do is have less cuspal stress and have less sensitivity after we place these restorations. So we're adapting these materials into the preparations, and we have low stress, which means we have longer life of the tooth and the restoration and everything else. So it's a wonderful way to go. And again, I'm a strong proponent of having a bulk fill strategy. Plus, with bulk filling, you need to maintain critical qualities of the posterior composite. What does that mean? Well, we need to have good compressive strength, right? We want to make sure that this material can withstand the occlusal forces, and also we need to have wear strength. Okay, so we need to have good compressive strength and we need to have good wear strength. And so this is everything that this material does, is that it fulfills the bulk fill criteria. The next thing is, I'm going to deviate a little bit. We need to talk about curing lights, because in a bulk fill situation, if you're using a halogen light or if you're using an old LED and you don't test your lights, or you don't look at the tips and see that they're cleaned, we need to get you going on that, because what happens is if you're using a less than optimal light, you will not have an optimal result. Optimal lights bring on optimal results. We need to get that light energy down into the box through that composite so that we can cure and initiate these materials. So so I'm going to suggest that you all look at your lights. We don't have enough time to go into depth with lights, but I just want to tell you that the light is probably the missing link in the longevity of a lot of our restorations. So so look at your light and make sure that you have a good quality light that you can use and trust. And also you should be testing your light with a radiometer that is, you can get from Shine or Patterson, whoever your rep is. They're only about $120, and it's an easy thing to get and to see that your light is putting out the correct power. If any of you need more information on lights, please email me after the course. But that's the key with bulk fill material. So when we're talking about these volumetric shrinkage, what we want to do is we want to see very little shrinkage, right? So we look at all of these materials and we compare these materials, and we see that certainly, sorry, let me go back. We see that genial bulk injectable is very, very good when it comes to a flowable material. And we see that the genial sculpt is even better, but we're concentrating on the volumetric shrinkage of the genial bulk. So it reduces the incidence of secondary caries and better marginal integrity because you have this wonderful low shrink material. Next, the shrinkage stress. This is important because it also reduces the incidence of secondary caries and you have better marginal integrity. But when you look at the genial bulk injectable, you can see that it compares to all of the other materials on the market very, very well. And it's better than most of them on the market. So when it comes to shrink and stress, we look at this is a very, very good product, and it will hold up when you're talking about that capping layer. It will definitely hold up to the pressures of the occlusal force. So next we're going to talk about wear resistance. And this is a big issue when it comes to flowables because traditionally we haven't been able to use a flowable in the capping layer and have the wear resistance that we would like. So, so we're going to look and see about the wear resistance, and we're going to see how the injectable holds up to wear resistance. And then you can see that in the top two lines, it's probably best in class when it comes to wear resistance. So you can see that even when you put it up against Filtech or Estelite Flow, any of these other ones, you can see that these injectables really do hold up to wear. And that's going to create a highly durable restoration on the occlusal surface. So we can rest assured with confidence that these materials are going to not only last, but be able to be there and serve our patients really, really well. So when we get into the ultra-high wear resistance, we can see without a doubt that the material will provide a highly durable and long-lasting restoration because of the way that this material tested out. The wear resistance is phenomenal. And so that's the beauty of this material. And that's the game changer that GC has presented here, is that we have a material that's flowable, can get into the cavo surface area, is bulk fill or 2 millimeter fill, and can resist wear. So here's what we're talking about with the surface after generalized wear. This is from the EvoCeram, which is the Ivoclar product, and this is Filtech Supreme after the wear. You see all these spaces in between, and when you see these genial bulk, these injectable materials, you see very little wear after 2,500 times the wear. So it really matches up to these other materials very, very well. Now, when we're talking about wear resistance, we're talking about these smaller filler particles that are resting on the surface. So when we chew or when we grind or occlude, what happens is that the light will bounce off these materials and will cause diffraction. But in these smaller filler particles, and this is why shine is so nice, is because when light bounces off, the shine actually is diffracted up toward the light. But your filler particles, when they come off of these materials, when these particles are lost because of chewing, and it happens with every material. With a smaller filler particle, you don't get as much loss of particles. But in these larger fillers, look at what happens. You get these large crevices. So that's why you get a lot of staining and a lot of breakdown around the margin, because the larger, the larger filler particles, which are made out of smaller fillers, break out of the surface. Okay. So the smaller filler is dispersed uniformly, occlusal load is distributed equally, and less damage to the surface or of the material. So when a high load is applied, the large filler particles come off easily, causing an uneven surface, which leads to a higher degree of wear. So that leads into gloss retention and shine. And on this slide, what we're looking at here is not the green, the dark green. We're looking at the lighter green graph. And what we're looking at is the gloss retention after these chewing cycles. So so when we look at these look at how genial bulk compares to all of these other materials. Very, very high in gloss retention, and you can see that as soon as you put it in and cure it. You really just have to use a polishing, either a fluted burr to polish, and we'll show you that in just a second. But they do polish well, and then as you use them, as they're brushed and as they have more occlusal force, they actually shine more because of the way that they wear. So so you don't really even have to shine it up before the patient leaves. It's already shiny, and then it continues to become more shiny as they use it. So it retains the gloss at a higher rate over time. And here's what we talk about when we talk about particle size and gloss retention and light refraction. When there's not as many particles that are missing, the light is refracted away from the material. But when we have these larger particles that fracture at the surface, the light will diffract and in all different directions and cause it to look less shiny. So when some fillers fall out, the surface becomes uneven with large gaps. That makes the light scatter irregularly, and the gloss is lost. So so it's a really cool material in that sense, because everything works together. The filler particles are small. That lends itself to the handling. That lends itself to the shine. That lends itself to the light dispense. So so it's a really great product for that. So let's talk a little bit about clinical cases here, and then we can have some questions at the end about these materials. But we're going to talk about some clinical cases and two in particular, and we'll talk a little bit about when we can use these products. Now, you're going to see a class 2 in these clinical cases, and you're going to see a class 5. But what I've found is that I'll have an injectable, either the 2 millimeter universal or the bulk, in my kits, in my composite kits, and I will reach for them almost well, all the time, because they serve so many purposes in the in my armamentarium. I can seal a endo treated tooth. I can use this material for a implant, closing the implant surface of the screw retained implant restoration, and the list goes on and on. You can use it in pedo wonderfully, and so the list goes on, and it's a very friendly, clinician friendly material. So here we have a class 2. This lady came in and she had a buildup material in this tooth. I like to call that a Bluetooth, and she came in already wired for Bluetooth. So we took that out. She was having some recurring decay, took out all the decay, and created this class 2 preparation. And I use a selective etch technique because I use a 7th generation or one bottle adhesive system, and we'll look at that a little bit. But I'll use a selective etch, so I make sure that the enamel on the preparation is etched really, really well and treated well and cleaned up very nicely. So we use a selective etch, we wash that off, and then we'll go ahead and use our 7th generation. I use a G Premio bond, and it's a 7th generation, one bottle system. You can go ahead and put this in the entire area of the restoration, and you can see that this is, soaking in and really working, and you can blow that off, so that there are no puddles, and it's very thin material, so it's easy to blow away. And then we'll light cure and start to inject our universal injectable. Now, why aren't I using the bulk fill? Well, this is a pretty easy tooth to get to. If it were a class 2, I would use a bulk fill, but in that it's a pretty easy tooth to get to and it's well isolated, I want to use the traditional universal injectable, and it worked out really, really well. So we went ahead and filled it all up, and that's what you get when you have, this is just the look of it after we've light cured the final layer. And now we're going to go and we're going to use a diamond egg and straight burr to go ahead and make our anatomy, and then we will use an enhanced cup, and we'll go ahead and make that go. But I don't have to do anything else than that, and it's pretty easy, straightforward, no nonsense, quick restoration. Could I have used the bulk fill? Absolutely. We could use the bulk fill in that situation without a problem. I just chose to use the injectable. Here's another case that was recently done. We had a lady that had a class 5, typical class 5, but this was very deep. So I had to use here's the restoration on top, the pre-op. And so what I had to do is, when I started taking out all of this decay, I saw that it went really subgingival. So I took out the diode laser. I used the AMD diode laser, and we just kind of troughed it down and found the edge of the tooth and the margin of the tooth of where the decay was. And it's very, very easy, very quick. And you can see that there's a ton of decay down below the margin. And we cleaned all of that out very, very well. And we're left with a very deep, incredibly deep class 5 restoration. Now, this tooth was asymptomatic. This tooth had no radiographic evidence of any problem. And so even though we think we can see the nerve, I think this is sclerosed over, and again on the X-ray it showed that the nerve didn't start until way below this area. So I was fine with all of that. In case anybody's wondering, I was wondering as well. So I looked at the X-ray, and certainly the nerve started apical to where we were with our restoration. But what did I want to do? Because it was so deep, I wanted to protect this area, and so I decided to use a little bit of a different strategy. I used the GC Fuji 2 LC, and this is a light cure glass ionomer, a resin-modified glass ionomer, but I wanted to put this on this tooth so that we could get some protection. So what I did is I beveled this area, and I'm going to use a closed sandwich technique here. And what that means is that this glass ionomer, I'm going to put into the dentin part, the deepest part of this restoration, of this preparation, and then I'm going to put, and then I'm going to light cure it. So what I'm doing here is I'm placing this cavity conditioner that comes with this GC Fuji 2 LC. It's a great new product. It allows you to do a lot more, because instead of waiting for glass ionomer to cure and to have to use the titrator, we can light cure this. So I can use this in a lot of different situations as well, and so I use it in this situation, and I put the cavity conditioner on, washed it off, and I'm only putting that on the dentin. Okay. Now what I'm doing is putting the GC Fuji 2 into the dentin part. I'm not putting anything on the outside enamel area, and I'm leaving a little bit of a space here for my injectable flow, for my injectable universal. And so I go ahead and I'll put this in, and the Fuji 2LC. I'll cure it, and then I will go ahead and I will etch over the top of that, because I want to etch all of my enamel, and I want to etch all of my Fuji 2LC. And I want to create a closed sandwich environment. So here we are after everything's closed. And if you can, I don't know if you can zoom in on this or not, but the thing of it is you've got a great bevel now along here, and we can see our margin all the way around. So we'll go ahead and use our G-Premio bond on the enamel, and I'll put that on the Fuji 2LC. And I'll go ahead and I'll blow that out so there's no puddling. And again, we can see our margin very, very easily down at the gingival surface. And so we can polish that at the end, and we can make sure we have access to it. But I'll go ahead and I'll put my G-Premio bond, G-Premio bond on, and then I'll blow it off and light cure it. And then I'll go ahead and put my injectable in. Now, the cool thing about the injectable is that it will stay where you put it, right? So you don't have to worry about turning your head or stopping or going to get your composite instrument and having it slump out. This will stay where you put it. And again, that's another trick with these injectables. It flows very nicely. It forms very nicely, but it stays where you put it. So it's a really cool consistency. Now, what I'll usually do in this situation is and the other thing is it doesn't stick to your instruments, and some flowables just have a tendency to stick like crazy instruments. So you'll rub your composite instrument, your paddle, over the top of this class 5, and it'll wash it all out sometimes. So this is a nice material because it doesn't wash the material out of the preparation, and you can put it and place it and it'll stay right there, but it's still flowable. So once we put it in and once we put it around on all of the margins, we want to overfill. I like to overfill, and then I'll go back with an ultrafine diamond point, and I'll just take off the overfill area until I get down to close to the margin area, and just bring that material back. So I'm using a Genial Universal Injectable. I'm using an enhanced polishing point here, followed by a 12 flute carbide finishing burr. And I'm able to have access to this margin at the gingival surface and all the way around. So it's very, very easy. And again, I beveled this, so I'm going to leave a little bit on the gingival or the enamel area, just so that we can, have more to stick to. We want that surface area to increase that we're sticking to, and we want to make sure that that all is manageable. So this is very, very easy. I don't have to work real hard at the polish at all. I didn't even have to do the 12 flute. I just did it to take off the excess material around the margin. I did the enhanced cup so I could finish the grooved areas that my diamond created. And so I'm just polishing this out so that I can, so that it'll look great. But I don't have to put a lot of work into it. And even if you don't use a diamond and you go right to your 12 flute, that's fine too, however you like to do it. So here's the finished product. This gum, you can see, it was a nice picture because you can see the finish line is nice and clean and smooth, and this gum will grow right back up there. I don't have to worry about the diode laser. Does a great job with taking this tissue away. I've got a great shine and adaptation. And so the final sealed class 5 restoration was very, very easy because of this injectable material. Now, I use this injectable material as well when I'm doing class 2s and an MO or a DO or an MOD class 2, because it saves me a lot of time, and I'll usually reach for the bulk fill injectable. And so that's a nice way to go too. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to open it up to any questions, and we can go from there. So I appreciate you you being here. So here's a question. Did you say that the material uses zirconia crystals as the filler? No, not this material. This material does not. It uses a different material, but I'm saying that Ivoclar and 3M came out with a material. One of them used a zirconia filler, but this one does not, no. Well, another question is the wear resistance significant because of the solvent that is surrounding the solute, the crystals? Yeah, the wear resistance is extremely significant when you're talking about an injectable or flowable material, because we haven't been able to do that yet up until now. We haven't been able to put that capping layer on. We've been able to use a flowable in a filling type of material that didn't have a cap, but now with this injectable we can use it as a capping. So wear resistance is absolutely fundamental in the injectable material. Is there a significant viscosity difference between the 2 millimeter and 4 millimeter material? And if not, why use the 2 millimeter material at all? That's a good question. Is there a significant viscosity difference? A little bit. There's a little bit of material difference there, but it's not significant. Extrusion is wonderful, but why use 2 millimeter at all? Well, because in some situations you're going to need a 2 millimeter because you have less. You can use the bulk fill. It's a wonderful material, but you're right. I mean, if you wanted to have the 4 millimeter bulk fill material, absolutely. The shine is wonderful. The wear is great. Everything is the same with this material. It's just one is in a 4 millimeter, one is millimeter. The significance in viscosity is, I guess that goes back to clinician choice. I personally like a little bit with that bulk material. It is a little bit a little different, but not that much. They both, if you were to put a dollop onto a piece of paper, it will build up. Okay, like an emoji that we know, right? It'll build up like that. So it's a good material in both areas, but it also flows well as well when you're in that cable surface area. Availability of shades, it's a really good question. It comes in a wide variety. I think it comes in 7 different shades, and so you can get a wide variety of shades. The nice thing about these filler particles, though, when we're talking about shades, is it blends super well. So if you're in an A2 shade, I've been using A2 primarily, and it really covers a lot of territory. So, you know, I might get an A1, I have an A2, I might get into the C shade if a little darker, weird color bleaching. So yeah, it comes in a variety of different shades. Let's see, more questions here. Is it advisable to use injectable in case of a heavy occlusion? You know, that's, if you've got a large occlusion, a heavy wear or bruxer, you know, I'd be a little bit conservative with this. You might want to try it, and if it's starting to wear a little bit more, then just put a bigger filler material in. But in most cases, this looks like it's holding up really well to occlusal wear, and it's really comparable to any of my other composites that I've been using so far. Okay, so let's talk about, great questions. So because it's a flowable, occlusal adjustment to centric bite has to be an extra step, because we can't use the anatomical carver when using a regular composite. Well, that's true. You do, but you do have to cut it back. But I've never really been able to put a composite in and use an anatomical carver and not have to do adjustment. So the adjustment that you have to do is very little. It depends on how every clinician is different in how they bulk it up. So yes, you will have to take it back to centric occlusion and work with that. But again, you have to do that with a regular composite as well. Do I get good contacts using the flowable like you do with the packable composite? Absolutely, because our contacts, this is a great question, our contacts aren't coming from the composite that we're using. We can't pack that composite tight enough to push that band into the adjacent tooth. Our contacts are coming from the matrix system that we're using. So if you're using there are wonderful matrix systems out there. I love Garrison. Garrison is an awesome matrix system. There's Paladent Plus, there's Triodent. They all have a good system for contacts. So if you're not using a sectional matrix system like a Garrison, then then you should probably do that. But we get our contacts from the matrix system that we use. So that's good. How is this material being used in pedo? Good question. I've heard it being used quite extensively for occlusal restorations, class 2 restorations, class 5s, just like we do in adult areas. You can use it probably as a if you're doing a micro etch on a sealant, you can probably use it there. Again, it's very, very versatile, and it stands up to that occlusal wear. So good question. I'm just looking through the rest of these. Good. Well, we have a lot of questions answered. Hydrophilic or hydrophobic? The question is, do you operate? Does the operative environment need to be totally dry? In any composite restoration, it's important to have and control your field that you're working in. And I like to work in a dry field, so absolutely, this is not moisture tolerant. So don't expect that you can use these materials in any other way other than the correct way, which is in a dry field. Okay, so we can't bond to we cannot bond to blood, and we can't bond to saliva. So absolutely, this needs to be used in a dry field. Does it have a good life in a class 4? Yeah, I've used it in a class 4, and it has to be the right class 4 because you have to watch out for as you do with any class 4, have to watch out for occlusal interference, right? So absolutely, it's just as good as any other material out there to use in a class 4. And it's almost better sometimes because you can get that contact. I usually use a the plumber's tape kind of matrix for the adjacent tooth, and I can really flow that material into the contact area and create a nice contact for my class 4s. So shine is great, wear is fantastic, and just like with any class 4, you have to just be careful with so often I'll see people just make the tooth look great and not worry about the occlusion, and occlusion is everything in a class 4. All right. So yeah, you can use, if you're using a gluma desensitizer, you can use the same thing. And can you use gluma desensitizer prior to G Premio bond? Absolutely. You can use the gluma desensitizer after you etch, and if you're not using an etch for a 7th generation like G Premio Bond, then you can use the Gluma desensitizer or whatever desensitizer you're using prior to putting the G Premio Bond down. Yeah, great question. Excellent. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions out there? Yeah, what about for class 2 primary molar and primary anterior strip crowns? Yeah, absolutely. This is a great material for that. Like I said, a lot of pedo use for this material because it is so strong, because it is so wear resistant. It's a great material. All right, so hopefully I've answered all the questions. I may, long-term follow-up, this is a good question. I think what they're asking for is, have you used it, how long have you used this material? I've been using this material for about 6 to 8 months, and I have had wonderful results with it. That's what I've been looking for. I've been using it in patients that have had a lot of wear and a lot of, just in places where you wouldn't normally use an injectable flowable material, and certainly this has been wonderful. But again, I want to tell you that the light is very, very important. So you need to all check your lights, and that's the missing link. If you're not getting enough light energy, I don't care what composite you're using, what flowable, what injectable you're using, it just won't work. So definitely use a good light. Good. All right. If there are no other questions, I'm going to end about 10 minutes early. And you guys were a great audience. If you need anything else, let me know. But I encourage you all to use this product and at least try these products and see if it doesn't help your clinical results and satisfaction chairside. So thanks very much and have a good night.